Breaking news, Browns rookie QB Shedeur Sanders is officially out of Saturday's preseason game versus the Eagles with an oblique injury. He is considered a day-to-day with an oblique strain, and Dylan Gabriel might be the starting quarterback for the Browns heading into the week 2 of the preseason game versus the Eagles.
The NFL is facing a problem it didn't expect this early in the season. With Shedeur Sanders sidelined by an oblique injury, the league's ratings have taken a sharp dive, leaving networks and sponsors scrambling for answers. Cleveland's young star had quickly become one of the NFL's biggest draws, but without him on the field, fan excitement has cooled, ticket markets are struggling, and television viewership has dropped in a noticeable way. When the NFL released its viewership numbers following Shedeur Sanders' absence, the difference was immediately clear. The Browns' nationally televised slot, which had been drawing near playoff level attention, saw its ratings dip by nearly 30% compared to the previous week. Local markets felt it even harder as Cleveland broadcasts that had been trending above the league average suddenly fell below the national median. Sports networks knew Sanders was a draw, but the magnitude of the drop without him sent a ripple of concern throughout the league offices. For years, the NFL has relied on established veterans like Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson to anchor ratings. This was one of the first times in recent memory where a rookie quarterback's absence had such a measurable impact on the entire weekly slate. The effect wasn't limited to television. Streaming numbers through NFL Plus and Amazon Prime's analytics revealed a stark contrast between games Sanders was expected to play in and those he was sidelined for. In the Browns' preseason opener, where Sanders logged significant snaps, live streams jumped 42% compared to the team's preseason average the year before. When the announcement of his injury came out, Prime's internal data showed that subscriptions linked to Cleveland's games slowed to a crawl. Fans who were there to see the young quarterback weren't tuning in without him. That translated into one of the sharpest week-to-week streaming declines of any team this year, a trend that alarmed broadcast executives. Inside Cleveland, the drop was felt at the ticket gate. The Browns had been riding a wave of excitement after Sanders' debut, selling out practice sessions and open scrimmages in record time. But once news spread that the rookie would miss time with an oblique injury, secondary markets cooled off. Ticket resale sites that had been moving Browns seats at triple face value saw prices flatten to near the original retail number. In some cases, seats that had been listed at $250 a week earlier were now going for $110. Attendance numbers reflected the shift. The following home game drew 6,800 fewer fans than Sanders' last start, a decline that is hard to ignore in a stadium that has struggled historically to sell out in down years. Cleveland hadn't experienced a swing that dramatic since the early 2000s, when the team's quarterback situation was in constant turmoil. National networks also felt the sting. Fox, CBS, and ESPN rely on high-profile rookie quarterbacks to boost ratings, and Sanders had been on pace to deliver some of the biggest rookie-driven spikes since Andrew Luck entered the league in 2012. Nielsen data from his first nationally broadcast game showed a 21% lift in households tuning in, translating to nearly 3.5 million additional viewers compared to a comparable Browns game a year prior. When Sanders was sidelined, the Browns' slot lost those extra eyes and then some, drawing almost 2.1 million fewer viewers than the league projected. It was the kind of swing usually reserved for star quarterbacks missing in late December, not a rookie in early September. For the NFL, this raised uncomfortable questions about how much of its early season promotional push had been tied to Sanders alone. Sportsbooks and gambling platforms provided another clear indicator of Sanders' value. DraftKings reported that prop bets tied to Cleveland dropped 48% in volume the week of Sanders' injury, one of the steepest declines tied to a single player. Fans who had been betting on Sanders' passing yards, completion percentage, and touchdown totals simply stopped placing wagers when he wasn't on the field. For comparison, when Lamar Jackson sat out in 2021, Baltimore's betting handle dropped about 22% in his absence. The Browns nearly doubled that figure with Sanders out, underscoring how heavily the betting market had latched onto his story. In Las Vegas, sportsbooks trimmed Cleveland's future odds dramatically, not only in terms of wins, but in public money wagered. Without Sanders, the Browns had gone from one of the most bet-on teams in futures pools to nearly invisible within 48 hours. From a developmental standpoint, the timing couldn't have been worse. Sanders had been logging valuable preseason reps, and the coaching staff was counting on live action to evaluate his chemistry with the starting offense. In the game before his injury, Sanders completed 67% of his passes, tallying 245 yards and 2 touchdowns in limited time. His pocket presence had been praised, and analysts noted his adjusted completion rate on throws beyond 15 yards was over 72%, a mark well above league average for rookies. Those numbers were fueling optimism in Cleveland, not only for the season ahead, but for the franchise's long-term trajectory. Missing snaps against live NFL defenses robs Sanders of development time, and coaches know that missed practice and game reps are nearly impossible to replicate. For head coach Kevin Stefanski, it leaves him without critical film to evaluate how Sanders handles pressure against first-string defenses. Meanwhile, on the fan side, the response was immediate and visible across social media. Hashtags that had dominated trending charts, #Shedeur time, dog pound era, lost traction almost overnight. Engagement around Brown's content dipped nearly 40% on X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram, a drop that mirrors the decline seen when stars like Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady have missed time. Cleveland had been in the spotlight, drawing national media features and climbing into conversation threads usually dominated by perennial contenders. Once Sanders was ruled out, those conversations largely shifted back to teams like the Chiefs, Bills, and Eagles. The buzz that had been fueling the Browns' place in the cultural conversation evaporated, a sign of just how central Sanders had become to the franchise's narrative. The league's own marketing push also ran into problems. Commercial spots that had been centered around Sanders' highlight packages lost their edge as the NFL scrambled to pivot toward other storylines. For instance, ESPN's Monday Night Countdown originally featured Sanders in 2 promotional teasers. Without his availability, the network swapped in generic footage of other rookies, a move that lacked the same impact. Internal ratings for those promos reportedly underperformed, showing a 19% lower engagement rate compared to Sanders-led packages. That small but measurable decline reflects the larger challenge. The NFL had tied so much of its marketing muscle to a rookie quarterback, only to see that momentum stall in a matter of days. Even merchandise sales told the same story. Sanders' jersey had cracked the league's top 5 sellers in his first month, outselling veterans like Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert. When news of his injury broke, Fanatics reported a 36% week-to-week drop in Sanders-related orders. By comparison, jersey sales for Caleb Williams, another rookie, held steady, suggesting that the market drop was injury-specific and not just a broader cooling of rookie hype. For Cleveland, this was a missed financial opportunity. A hot rookie quarterback is one of the few assets that can spike revenue streams across multiple verticals at once, from tickets to jerseys to concessions. Losing that momentum midstream isn't something teams or sponsors recover from easily. Perhaps the most telling metric came from local sponsorship deals. Businesses in Cleveland had been investing heavily in campaigns tied to Sanders' rise, including car dealerships, apparel shops, and even restaurants offering Shedeur specials. Within a week of his injury, many of those campaigns pulled back their ad spends. Radio spots featuring Sanders' name dropped off local airwaves, and regional TV partners adjusted their ad slots. Marketing analysts in Ohio noted that it was the kind of retraction usually seen late in a season when playoff elimination was certain, not in the preseason or early regular season when hope should be at its peak. This local retrenchment underscores how fragile the excitement was and how closely tied it was to Sanders' health. All of these numbers, from ratings to merchandise to sponsorships, paint the same picture. The NFL is under fire because its early season success was leaning heavily on one rookie quarterback. Sanders had become the face of Cleveland's turnaround, the driver of fan interest, and the catalyst for measurable business growth. His oblique injury stripped that momentum away, and the fallout is visible in nearly every corner of the league's financial ecosystem. For fans, the disappointment is emotional. For owners, it's financial. And for networks, it's existential, raising the uncomfortable question of how much longer they can sustain the Sanders-dependent boost without him on the field. There is also the matter of locker room psychology. Teammates had rallied behind Sanders, praising his leadership and maturity. Veteran guard Joel Bitonio noted that Sanders brought a calm energy to the huddle, a quality rarely found in rookie quarterbacks. With him sidelined, the offense lacks that stabilizing presence. Backup quarterbacks may fill the reps, but they do not carry the same aura or authority. That shift can affect everything from offensive line communication to route timing. Football is as much mental as it is physical, and when the central figure of the offense is absent, cohesion naturally suffers. Coaches are forced to adjust play calling, scaling back packages that Sanders had been executing smoothly, and reverting to more generic schemes to accommodate less experienced arms. The result is a team preparing for the season with a diluted version of its playbook. Financially, the Browns front office is under pressure. Sanders' arrival had sparked a surge in merchandise and ticket sales, giving Cleveland one of its best off seasons in years. His jersey was a top seller nationally, and the team had sold out season ticket packages in record time. Now, projections for in-game revenue are being revised downward. Concession vendors, who rely on higher attendance, are preparing for softer sales. Local businesses that tied promotions to Sanders' appearances are holding back on marketing spends. Even sportsbooks in Ohio are reporting declines in Browns-specific bets, a sharp contrast to the surge when Sanders was active. The economic footprint of a single player may seem exaggerated, but the data is clear. Sanders' absence costs the team, the city, and the league millions in aggregate revenue opportunities. From the NFL's perspective, the injury raises long-term concerns about its star-making model. The league has increasingly leaned into individual personalities to drive engagement, especially younger stars who bring in new demographics. Sanders was positioned as one of the pillars of that strategy, with his family legacy, college heroics, and immediate popularity creating a perfect narrative. Losing him, even temporarily, exposes the risks of that approach. If too much attention is tied to a single player, the league becomes vulnerable when that player is unavailable. This isn't just about Cleveland, it's about the balance of marketing across all 32 teams. The NFL thrives on parity and widespread interest, but Sanders' absence reveals how quickly the balance can skew when one marketable figure is removed from the equation. Another key angle is the competitive landscape. The AFC North is one of the toughest divisions in football, featuring Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and now a Pittsburgh team loaded with young talent. Every rep Sanders misses puts the Browns further behind in the arms race. Vegas oddsmakers had Cleveland at plus 240 to win the division with Sanders active, but those odds slipped to plus 400 following news of his injury. Playoff odds also dropped by nearly 11 percentage points in projection models. While those numbers may shift again once Sanders returns, the immediate perception is that Cleveland is less of a contender without him. In a league where perception often drives reality, from betting lines to primetime scheduling, that kind of statistical downgrade carries weight. What makes this moment so critical is timing. Rookie quarterbacks often face a steep learning curve, but Sanders had been ahead of schedule, showing poise and efficiency in limited action. Now, the injury stalls that trajectory at a point where momentum was most valuable. For the Browns, every missed rep is a lost opportunity to build chemistry and continuity. For Sanders, every day off the field risks opening the door for criticism about durability and readiness. And for the NFL, every game without him represents millions in lost viewership and business opportunities. That combination player, team, league is why this injury matters now. It's not just a setback, it's a test of how dependent the NFL has become on a single rookie to carry its narrative. When looking at the impact of Shedeur Sanders' absence, the comparisons to past rookies and young quarterbacks are unavoidable. The NFL has long leaned on star quarterbacks to drive ratings, but very few rookies have had this kind of measurable influence on viewership and business metrics right out of the gate. To understand the scale of the fallout, it helps to put Sanders' early effect and the vacuum his oblique injury created side by side with historical cases. One of the most immediate parallels fans bring up is Andrew Luck in 2012. When Luck was drafted by the Colts as Peyton Manning's successor, Indianapolis saw a spike in ticket demand and TV coverage that rivaled veteran-driven markets. That season opener against the Bears, with Luck under center, drew nearly 12 million viewers, a 24% increase from the prior year's opener without Manning. However, the difference was that Luck never missed early time due to injury, so his momentum remained intact. Sanders, by contrast, has already caused a swing in numbers simply by being unavailable, something Luck avoided in his rookie campaign. Where Luck's presence boosted ratings by a quarter, Sanders' absence has cut into Cleveland's audience by nearly a third. That reversal shows how dependent the Browns brand and the league's marketing machine had become on Sanders after just a handful of appearances. Another relevant case is Robert Griffin III, who entered the league in 2012 as one of the most hyped rookies in recent memory. Griffin's rookie year drew spikes in both national ratings and local attendance, with Washington games jumping 31% in viewership compared to the prior season. When Griffin was healthy, Washington's broadcasts were among the most watched in the league, but when injuries began to mount later in his career, the drop-off was brutal. Games without Griffin in 2013 saw declines of 28% in ratings, and local attendance sagged by nearly 10,000 seats. Sanders' injury-induced absence has triggered a similar pattern, but far earlier in his career. The difference is that the NFL is now in an era of fragmented attention spans and streaming-first consumption, making every dip sharper and more costly. What Griffin revealed about reliance on a rookie QB a decade ago is now being replayed at an even larger scale with Sanders. Then there's Joe Burrow's rookie campaign in 2020. Burrow became an instant draw for Cincinnati, lifting local broadcasts by 27% compared to 2019 and boosting merchandise sales across the region. But when Burrow tore his ACL mid-season, the fallout was immediate. Viewership for Bengals games dropped by over 35% for the remainder of the year. Ticket resale prices cratered, and Cincinnati, which had been one of the league's surprise hot tickets, returned to struggling with empty seats. Burrow's situation is perhaps the clearest parallel to Sanders, though the scale of Sanders' absence is sharper in the short term. Burrow had half a season to establish himself. Sanders barely needed a month before fans and networks were fully invested. That's why even a minor oblique injury, which might only keep him out a few weeks, has produced a ratings crisis on par with Burrow's season-ending ACL tear. It's not only rookies worth examining here. Established veterans show how injuries can crater ratings, but the fact that Sanders is producing similar swings as a first-year player is telling. When Aaron Rodgers went down in 2017, Green Bay's ratings dipped nearly 35% without him, a loss of millions of viewers across multiple networks. Similarly, when Tom Brady was suspended in 2016, New England's primetime draws lost an estimated 2.8 million viewers on average. These are quarterbacks with Hall of Fame resumes whose absence predictably gutted the NFL's bottom line. Sanders being mentioned in the same breath with his absence producing a comparable percentage decline illustrates just how rare his immediate influence is. No other rookie in recent history has commanded that kind of pull. Even Patrick Mahomes, now the league's premier ratings anchor, did not generate the same instant fallout when sidelined in 2019 with a knee injury. Kansas City's broadcasts dipped, yes, but the decline was closer to 18% compared to Sanders' 30%. The difference lies in timing. Mahomes had already built a reputation, and fans trusted the Chiefs' supporting cast to hold interest. Sanders, however, is the story in Cleveland. His name, his background, and his play style are the centerpiece. Remove him, and the entire framework collapses. That unique dependency is what makes Sanders' situation stand out in NFL history. Historically, even hyped rookies like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields never produced this kind of measurable business swing. Jacksonville's local viewership improved by 19% during Lawrence's first season, but games without him didn't register the same catastrophic drops. Chicago's attendance and ratings were boosted by Fields' presence, yet fans still showed up during his absences because the Bears brand was strong enough to sustain interest. Cleveland, by contrast, has struggled for decades to hold national attention, making Sanders' presence not just a luxury, but a necessity. The Browns without him revert to being one of the least compelling teams on television, and the numbers reflect that in stark terms. The most instructive comparison might actually come from Tim Tebow's short-lived NFL career. Tebow's games drew massive national ratings, and Denver saw a spike in both ticket sales and merchandise when he started. Nielsen data from 2011 showed that Denver's primetime games with Tebow outdrew several playoff-bound teams. But once Tebow was benched and eventually phased out, the Broncos' national appeal dropped almost overnight. Sanders is showing a similar effect, but with a far more polished skill set and higher ceiling. Tebow was a cultural phenomenon with limited staying power. Sanders looks like a legitimate franchise quarterback who also happens to be a cultural magnet. That combination magnifies the cost of his absence. The percentage shifts tell the story better than anything else. With Sanders on the field, Cleveland's preseason viewership was up 42% year over year. Without him, it dropped by nearly 30% week to week. Ticket resale markets went from triple face value to barely above retail. Jersey sales, which had cracked the top 5 league-wide, fell 36% in 1 week. Gambling prop bet volume dropped 48%. These are the kinds of swings typically reserved for MVP caliber veterans, not rookies in their first month. Compared historically, Sanders' absence is unprecedented in scale. It highlights how uniquely positioned he was to change the Browns' fortunes and how vulnerable the NFL becomes when a single player holds that much leverage over ratings. This isn't just about numbers, it's about narrative. Mahomes, Burrow, and Jackson became stars through their play, but their teams and markets already had some built-in value. Cleveland has long been a struggling brand, and Sanders had single-handedly elevated it into the spotlight. Historically, the NFL has thrived on balanced stars spread across markets, multiple quarterbacks anchoring ratings. Sanders' absence reveals a break in that balance. The league has found itself overly dependent on one rookie in one market, and history shows that such dependency rarely ends well. If Sanders bounces back quickly, this will be a short-term blip, but if the oblique lingers or worsens, the NFL risks reliving the same pattern we saw with Griffin, Burrow, and even Luck's massive initial hype derailed by injury, with long-term consequences for both player and league. The comparisons also serve as a warning. Fans remember how Griffin's career unraveled, how Burrow's ACL slowed Cincinnati's rise, and how even Luck's brilliance was ultimately cut short by physical setbacks. Sanders is at the very beginning of his career, but the parallels are already too strong to ignore. The NFL has rarely been this exposed by one player's availability, and the historical record shows that once a league leans too heavily on a single figure, the consequences can reshape entire seasons. Sanders is now carrying that weight whether he wants to or not.